Greetings. I'm Kristian from Cinema Nova and welcome to the Intermission interviews. My guest today is the Australian director of 52 Tuesdays, a unique drama shot one day a week for a year, and one of my favourite films of 2019, the all-too-relatable comedy Animals. She's also a prolific producer, having co-created SBS drama series The Hunting. Welcome, Sophie HYDE. So Sophie, the last 12 months, it's been a roller coaster. For you, as an industry player, what stood out?
It's hard to go beyond your own sort of personal experiences of that. So for me, I was trying to think, what is a year ago? And for me, I was in the middle of finishing a TV series called The Hunting, which came out on SBS last August. And I was just getting ready to launch Animals, which was a feature film I made. So I was about to go overseas and do all of the press in the UK and go to festivals around the world. So the year has included those two things, which was two big releases for me. But it's also felt like a really quiet year in another way because I slunk into development, and development always feels really different, like a very different pace that you have. On a broader scale for me, like in terms of the industry, I've really enjoyed the sort of shift in formats that's going on, so that we're starting to watch things, of varying lengths again, that things are, I felt like for a long time everything became the same length. It was like, a movie was 90 minutes or an art house one was longer, and a TV series had these very rigid formats, and I feel like that cracked open just a little bit, like that we're allowing narrative to do something in a slightly different form. And that
that's
felt
a really
like
interesting idea. Yeah, because you think about it, particularly with binge watching, the rise of binge watching, and how people previously, as you say, 90 minutes was the sort of the standard running time of a short film. But now we're getting people into a place where potentially they're capable of watching 5 or 6 hours or something in one hit. Obviously, that's not something that everybody's able to do because it's such a time-consuming thing. But at the end of the day, it does certainly open up opportunities in terms of storytelling.
I think so, and I think it changes how you think of the narrative. Like, we were so used to where the turning points happened. But now that we watch over a longer period, we maybe are expecting movies to do a bit more. Movies get to do an extra little bit at the end rather than just that one singular story. It's like it complicates again. And maybe we're looking for a bit more of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good observation, and I'd like to think that, because if anything comes out of this great pause or the intermission or whatever you want to call it, I suppose the opportunity is that storytellers can be kind of any length. I mean, we've obviously seen the rise of TikTok in recent months, as well as the launch of Quibi, which is a new short-form mobile entertainment format. So I suppose the content creators on the top level, the people who are either at that Netflix level or at that streaming level, are recognising that people aren't necessarily locked into just watching a feature film length a piece of content. They're actually open to doing things that are far longer and far shorter. And I mean,
Isn't it ridiculous that you go, TikTok, you can watch those things, they're so quick, they happen so fast. The way that you have to read and interact with the piece is very quick. And you can stay in that space for quite a long time. But then, you can watch 6 hours of television. It's not like, I think for a long time people were like, things are going to get shorter. That was a huge thing. Yes. But the shortness of those things hasn't stopped those other big epic pieces growing, which is good.
Yeah, you're right. And on that front, I mean, what have you been watching over the break and over the great pause? Is there anything that stood out for you, either a TV series or a feature film that you had not seen, or that perhaps you revisited?
I tell you what, I've watched a few feature films. We went back and did this really silly thing where we watched 28 Days Later, Contagion, 12 Monkeys. and that was terrible. 28 Days Later, it stood up. It felt dated, but it was scary.
Yeah, it's very good.
We were showing our 15-year-old for the first time. It was like, what are we doing watching this? 12 Monkeys didn't stand up for me. I was just like, whoa. Not so much. But that was scary. I actually don't love watching films at home. I'm one of those people that I like watching series at home, but I can watch certain films but I want to be in the cinema. So, I watched Uncut Gems, which was also just so stressful. And it was really stressful to be at home and watch that.
Yeah.
But the films that I love in the world, And I usually love watching on the cinema screen. And they're not necessarily the giant spectacles. Yeah, they're like really intimate, very personal stories. I really enjoy those. And I don't necessarily want to watch them at home. So, you know, I've watched a bit of Unorthodox on Netflix, you know, which is really interesting. I've only done 2 of the 4 episodes, and I've watched Tiger King, but I'm really ashamed to say I've actually been watching Riverdale, like every season of Riverdale. And I started that because I was looking at some casting stuff, and then I just got a little bit hooked on it, and it's a really good, I mean, that's hours of show.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm the same. I recently took the plunge and subscribed to Amazon for the first time, and really got stuck into the marvelous Miss Maisel, which has been winning awards left, right, and centre for about a year and a half. And it's just one of those programs. It just gets in your head, and it's like, I really need to get back and see these characters again. And I suppose that's the thing. If something's really well written, something's really draws you in, then ultimately what it is it's the story that's bringing you back. It's not just a matter of like, I just need to get that out of my watch queue. It's actually the characters are sort of like subliminally in your head saying, you know, come back and watch more of us. Because I commented after watching, I think, the first 2 or 3 episodes of Marvelous Miss Maisel, I thought, I really actually want to get back and see these people, because it's so well written and so well realised and beautifully produced. So, yeah, it's... I think that's the mark of good writing, particularly on these long-form shows.
I'm not sure if that's why I'm coming back to Riverdale, or if it's just pure relief at the moment. It's funny, I think about something like Chernobyl, which I watched last year, or Chernobyl, I don't know how you say that, but I mean, that I couldn't stop watching that. I watched it on a plane, unfortunately, and that was terrifying as well, but terrifying in a different way. I found the writing of that so compelling, and I couldn't stop viewing it, you know.
Yeah, that is a masterpiece, and anybody who's not seen that, I think it's on Foxtel, it really ought to check it out. It's an extraordinary piece of television, and I think it won a variety of awards at the most recent Emmy season, or perhaps it was the Globes, but all of them very well deserved. But I thought the most interesting thing about that series was the idea that I think with practically every actor, that they just said to the performers, don't bother using your Russian voice, your accent. We just want you to do this in your regular accent. And they actually, I understand they did that in order to avoid people resorting to type or archetype of like, I am the Russian person. They actually just got into the performance of the character rather than just sort of recycling the way that they feel or felt that maybe Russian people sounded.
I think that's so amazing. It's something that really struck me watching it. I was like, they're all just speaking in their actual accents. Mm-hmm. And how is an audience accepting that? Everyone I've spoken to, almost everyone, didn't even notice that, by the way. And I think, how did they get away with that? But I agree, I really dislike kind of the accent that comes on, you know, with roles. And I wonder if that's like the beginning of opening up kind of, you know, casting that's where race becomes, you know, not as important, or we can kind of cast against what somebody was because it's somebody that suits it more, or, you know, like, will it break things up? Because that's a big change. I don't remember anything doing that on TV.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, you've just reminded me of a particular filmmaker I'm very fond of, Armando Iannucci, who did Death of Stalin and applied a similar thing there, where he just used American and English actors, and they just did their regular accents without resorting to, again, Russian. And his latest film, which was due to release just before cinemas were told to close down, was an excellent update of David Copperfield, which he had directed and written. And the most exciting thing for me about that project, the David Copperfield adaptation, was that he actually cast the entire film colorblind. So there was, for instance, a black performer might be playing the parent to a white child. And what it did for me as a viewer is it actually opened up the opportunity for these incredible characters to be best realised by the best possible performer, rather than simply is that particular English actor or actress available for this particular role.
I didn't know that they did that with David Copperfield. It's such a great cast. I'm so excited to hear that. I feel like theatre's been doing that for a while. That's been, the colourblind casting thing has been a thing. And I wasn't sure if it would translate to film because we're so obsessed with how people look, like that a parent needs to look like a child, and that if you have somebody in the past, they need to look exactly like them, you know. But for me, that's the thrilling thing. Imagine if you could do it with gender as well, or like sex, let's say, so that, you know, men could play women, women could play men, or a range of things.
Well, you're right. I mean, we've seen that occur on stage a lot lately. It's been very sort of chic to do sort of mix up the casting of Shakespeare or something like that. And Queen Lear, I think, was done by the MTC a while ago, and there was other variations. Yeah, I agree. I think that the opportunity there for storytelling is broadened by taking great leaps of faith, and it's not always going to work for everything, but when it does work, it can be really magical. And sort of thinking about, I suppose, the future. I mean, obviously, what we're going through right now is an extraordinary time. What's your take on what this might mean in terms of how audiences consume content, or the way that films might be told, or stories might be told?
Yeah, lots of people talking about this at the moment, because there's a real uncertainty about, you know, whether we come out of this wanting different kinds of stories, you know. I think there are some stories that are necessarily put on hold in a time like this, as in, you know, we had near future things that we were developing, things that included viruses and pandemics, and I'm not sure that they're relevant, you know. Some might say that they're more relevant, but they'll change, and we don't know what that change will be yet, because we don't really know how the world is going to come out of this. A lot of people are saying, you know, we will want really happy things where people come together and band together as communities. And I think there's a reason that people are talking like that, because I think there's, out of a lot of disaster areas, like out of the bushfires or out of earthquakes, you see people become really altruistic. You know, they don't become competitive. They shift and change, and there's this potential of community to transform in a really positive way. So people are looking for something like that. But I'm not sure that's exactly what we're looking for in our stories, because what we want in the world isn't necessarily what we want on the screen all the time. And so, you know, I think I'm still wanting to watch whatever it was I was watching before. I'm not thinking I need something that's about this change. And so that's I think we're going to want to watch things together. I hope we're going to want to watch things together again. Yes. I think it was inevitable that streamers became really popular over this time. They already were. We want the demand of being able to watch stories and content, as we call it, you know, all the time. And I think the exciting thing for all of us in the film or screen industry is that people watch more and more. I mean, we consume so much of it now. But I mean, I'm sure you agree with this, Chris, but I'm sure you agree, because I love going to film festivals. I love going to the cinema, because I like to watch with people, and it's a different kind of thing that I'll watch there. Yes. It's like, I'm never going to sit down and watch at the cinema what I watch at home, and vice versa. They just don't compete. But I miss watching it with people, where I go and have a drink afterwards and talk about it. I really miss that. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk. Will cinemas recover? I mean, I hope so. I think we've already seen that certain films are really hard to do in cinema now, and that's going to just, I guess, get harder. But the two ends of the extreme, for me, which is where cinema works for me, the big spectacles, and the really small, really intimate, very artful works, I can't imagine that you're going to just start watching them at home, you know?
Well, that's true. Yeah, I completely subscribe to your take. I think, as we know, anybody who's an avid moviegoer at the cinema is also more likely to be somebody who streams at home, and vice versa. The more streaming you watch, the more likely you actually go to the movies. There's been a variety of reports that have sort of said that. I suppose what we're at right now is, as a population, is that we've probably all got so much time on our hands that we're looking for anything to watch. However, I think that eventually we're just going to get a bit sick of sitting on the couch. And again, I mean, even though there is so much content that's available on any number of streamers or even the free-to-air networks, at the end of the day, I believe that there's actually the value of the curative sense of cinema programming, whether it's somewhere like Nova or, say, a film festival where you've got somebody who's sort of saying, you know what, this is actually worth seeing at the cinema. I think that's the difference maker. Whereas on these platforms, I mean, I subscribed to one of them the other day, and I commented to somebody that, I mean, there's a handful of good things on it that I'm enjoying. However, once you get through that top layer of quality, there's so much schlock in there that you think to yourself, is this really what I want to subscribe to? There are things about UFO abductions and conspiracies and stuff, and it's like, I'm not interested in that. I'm looking for this. So even though these platforms might offer a huge variety of content, a lot of it's stuff that you'll never ever sit down to watch.
Well, I mean, the most famous of those platforms, you know, I will watch so many TV shows on there, but I never would watch a movie on there. I mean, there's a very small handful of movies on that platform that are brilliant. You know, Roma, Marriage Story, the big movies.
Yep.
But really, they have no movies. I look up movies all the time, and there's just none of the things I want to see are there. We forget that. We think that we've got these streamers and everything's accessible, you know, at our fingertips. But there's a lot of great movies that aren't around on there still, and they're really hard to find again. It's funny, though, because obviously you guys at Nova have this beautiful cinema where, you know, you want to go in there. There's this community feeling. You feel like you're getting a really good range of films, their quality. There's sort of this feeling around it like you're going to something, that you're part of something. That's not the case everywhere. You know, we don't, and I think that's what we, you know, I think we look for that in the film festivals. We look for that at Nova. We do look for it at the cinema, but oftentimes you feel like you're walking in, it's like a film, and you leave again. And you see why people are steered away from it when it feels like that.
Yep.
You know, that really, you and I were talking about when we first saw Call Me By Your Name, and that beautiful moment I said to you where I sat down with a glass of wine, I'd snuck off from something. I was just on my own in a cinema. There was people all around me, but I wasn't with anybody. And the great pleasure of just being able to see something and know that everyone else is watching it with you. And, you know, that only happens if it feels special, if it feels like you're getting to do that in a kind of gorgeous way.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, I think, our respective experiences on on seeing that film certainly reinforce the idea that what you experience in the cinema can be completely different to the way that you experience that very same thing if you're watching it at home on the couch. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us, Sophie. It's so exciting to hear that you're using this time to your advantage and using it to create new content. And we really look forward to seeing what you bring to screen in the very near future once we resume transmission.
Thanks so much. Thank you.